Thank you. So I'd like to take this time to present to you Pure as a service. So let's just step back a bit and think about some of the problems that are affecting people today in terms of some of the commercial realities that we have. Obviously, there is unpredictable growth. We know that storage is growing, but I think, and this has become a lot more relevant during the time of COVID, is to do with cash flow and to do with money. So one of the issues is although customers pre-COVID may have had money to spend, they may be more reluctant to spend that money. They may want to make their money go further. So issues like this kind of lead to as a service opportunities, or where customers look at leases, or they're looking at a different way to get more out of their money. Plus, the situation is with some other vendors that every 3 to 5 years, you're going to be buying new hardware, new arrays, new storage, and doing data migrations. Again, it's something that becomes very painful and can be a waste of money. And hybrid cloud is very key to everyone's strategy at the moment. And we'll show you how Pure as a service can help with that. So it probably comes as no surprise, but as a service is something that's growing massively. We just announced our recent financial results, and the as a service portion of our business at Pure is growing massively. And you'll see this with many other vendors as well. But it is becoming more of a design choice that customers want the subscription-based options. They want to consume things as a service. Now, storage as a service isn't anything new. It's been around for a long time. Traditionally, customers have done things like leases, or you could buy cloud-based storage from the likes of Amazon, Azure, Google, etc. There's a couple of issues. Some companies would lease equipment rather than buy it because it was tax deductible. So it was actually tax efficient to lease your hardware. However, in most countries, leases are no longer treated as OPEX, it's treated as CAPEX, which can then change your company's valuation and your tax status. Also, when you look at storage in the public cloud itself, it doesn't have anywhere near the features that you're going to get from an enterprise class storage array. So, public cloud is good, but it does lack some of the key features that you'd want. We all know about cloud costs. I mean, the cloud, it's absolutely got a place for everyone, but everything. And the costs do tend to go up and up and up. And some of the costs increase because of the way the public cloud storage is designed. And let's face it, not everybody's going to move to the cloud. There are some companies that just can't consume the cloud. There's some data that shouldn't be in the cloud. So again, it's not the answer to everything, but hybrid cloud is definitely a key strategy. The way that customers usually consume storage is generally been the picture on the left, where you would buy a storage array and then you would start to fill it up. And then over time, you get towards 80 to 90% full and you buy more capacity or buy another array and the cycle starts again. If you're doing a consumption model, then you're going to pay for actually what it is that you're using. So you're not going to buy something that's only going to get to 80% full after a few years. You're going to pay for exactly what it is that you use. So it aligns very efficiently to an OPEX model. Pure as a service, and we will go into more detail, very simply, you pay for what you use. It is a true OPEX model. This is not a lease. This is classed as a true subscription service. It covers all of our products. And the key things that customers take away from this when looking at us compared to other vendors, it's a very short-term commitment. Again, more detail will follow. So with Pure as a service, you pay for the data that your applications actually use. It's what we call the effective capacity usage. You do not have to pay for what you provision. Generally, if you look at typical cloud-based storage, if you were to create or provision a 1 terabyte volume, you would be paying for that 1 terabyte straight away before you've even written any data. So this instantly means you're wasting money. With a true as a service model, you should be paying for what you use. So let's show how it works. We have a concept of reserve capacity. Now, an easy way to understand this, if you think, let's look at how mobile phone contracts used to work. So it may not be the same now, but initially mobile phone contracts, let's say you paid 20 euros a month and you had 500 minutes and 500 texts. If you stayed within your 500 minutes, it was a flat fee of €20 a month. If you went above your 500 minutes, then each call would be charged per minute at a slightly higher rate. That's exactly the way we do it. We start off with a minimum reserve commitment. So the customer has to make a minimum commitment. And I'll show you what the minimum commitments are shortly. But in this example, let's say the customer has said, right, my minimum commitment is over 24 months for 100 terabytes. So if they stay within their 100 terabytes, then they will never pay any more money above their traditional monthly or quarterly cost. However, the on-demand capacity is where they could go above that. So the reserve capacity will be at a lower cost compared to anything that goes on demand. So as soon as that customer goes above 100 terabytes, it would be more. So let's just use simple math. Let's say your reserve capacity works out at 10 cents per gigabyte per month. Your on-demand capacity would be about 15 cents. It's always kind of 50% more. The reserve capacity is billed in advance, either quarterly or annually, but the on-demand, we measure it 3 times daily, and then we meter it daily and bill it quarterly in arrears. Now, as you can see from this picture, it's going to get very expensive because the customer's paying for 100 terabytes at 10 cents per gigabyte. And then by the time you get to month 6, he's got an extra 100 terabytes, but he's paying 15 cents. He's paying a lot more money. What we can do with Pure as a Service, at any point during your contract, you can raise your reserve. So the amount that is costing you 10 cents a gig, you can raise that at any point during your contract term. Now, every time you raise this reserve, it does not push your contract end date further out. Your end date is still, in this example, at month 24. So you can see here at month 3, customer sees that he's got to about 150 terabytes and he knows that it's going to grow. So let's raise your reserve. So instead of paying 10 cents for 100 gig, he's paying 10 cents for 150. You can kind of also see that one of the things about this is, in terms of lowering your reserve, you can only do it at the end of your contract. So this could be a customer who has some kind of seasonal job. Maybe this is a retail company. So month 11, 12, and 13 correspond to Christmas, let's say November to January. So this customer knows that they're going to get a huge spike, but they don't want to raise their reserve to 700 or 800 terabytes because they know it's going to drop back down after a couple of months. So in this example, they've raised to about 450, 500 terabytes. They know they're going to have a big spike for a couple of months, which they're going to pay 15 cents per gigabyte, but then it drops back down to normal. And then at the end of the 24-month term, if they remove their data, or maybe they completely cancel their contract because they finish whatever it is they want to do, then they can lower their reserve. But again, it's the ability to raise this reserve at any point in time. And again, this is a service we're providing. So a couple of key things to note. We would work out how much effective capacity the customer needs. We would work out what kind of performance requirements, and we would put on premise an array that matches their requirements. The customer does not say to Pure, I would like an X50 or an X70. The customer gives us their requirements. We give them the service that matches that. And the service would be the physical array that provides the level of service that they need. We're constantly monitoring this. So when the array gets close to 80% full, this is the point where we'd contact the customer and say, please, can you open a ticket so we can access your data center? We want to add more capacity. And adding capacity to a Pure array has zero downtime. It has no impact on the applications. It costs the customer no money at all. We would add the additional capacity to make sure that they always have the capacity that they need, and the customer keeps paying their same monthly bill. So at Pure, we have a concept of something called evergreen. This is making sure that your technology always stays ahead of the curve. It always stays up to date with what you need, but it doesn't come at an additional cost. So things like doing upgrades to the firmware on the array or to any software, it's non-disruptive, right? It's included in the price. So unlike many other vendors, we don't have a whole list of software with Pure. So for example, if you wanted to do active cluster, which is synchronous replication with site-to-site failover, that doesn't cost any money. If you want to do clones, that's included. So there are no hidden extra costs with this. You pay your fixed cost per gigabyte per month. Everything is included. There's nothing where we could suddenly say, oh, here's a feature, but it's another 2 cents a gig. We do not do that. Pure One is our phone home capability. It's the monitoring capability where you can see the performance, the analysis, you can see everything you would need to manage your arrays. And then from a hardware perspective, if your array needs a hardware because it needs more performance or it needs more capacity, that's down to us. We will make sure that your hardware is always up to spec and it always gives you exactly what you need. So we would ship the hardware, and then in terms of doing the installs, it could be down to you, right? The partner can do the installs and the upgrades for this. And again, one of the key things to note, it's a non-disruptive upgrade. This has been one of the key selling points of Pure since day one for the last 8 or so years. If we put on site an array that after 3 years as Pure as a service, we needed to upgrade it to a larger one, upgrades are done totally non-disruptively. Now, just compare this with any other storage vendor that you may sell. Is it possible for that other vendor to go from one storage array to a completely different one non-disruptively with no impact to service and no impact to the customers? Generally, the answer is no. With Pure, all of our upgrades have been 100% non-disruptive from day one. So in terms of hybrid cloud options, so the way that Pure as a service is offered, it's 2 things really. Mainly, it's a physical array that we would put in your own data center. We could put it in the colo. But also, if you look on the right-hand side in the cloud, there's something called CBS. So CBS is Cloud Block Store. Cloud Block Store, to explain it very simply, I won't go into detail now, but Cloud Block Store is a Pure flash array running as a software virtual appliance in the cloud. It's available in AWS today, and it will be available in Azure later this year, and then Google at some point next year. So Cloud Block Store looks exactly the same as a physical flash array, except that it's a virtual software appliance running on AWS infrastructure. So with this, you can have a true hybrid cloud. You could be paying 10 cents a gigabyte, and your data could be hosted on a physical flash array in your colo or data center, but you could also replicate that data to Cloud Block Store in the cloud. So you're going from Pure to Pure, but one is physical and one is virtual in the cloud, but you're still paying one subscription for this. So again, it's Pure as a service. It's not flash array as a service, it's Pure as a service, everything that we do. So we have the block performance tier service, which is based around flash array and Cloud Block Store. We have the capacity tier, which is physical. It's based around flash array C, which is our QLC based array. So it has a much lower cost. We also can do a unified fast file and object using our FlashBlade technologies for your HPC, DevOps type workloads, etc. And then we can do just Cloud Block Store on its own. So obviously with Cloud Block Store, you've still got to pay for the AWS resources. Now, just to note, we have a special offer. So it's definitely worth going to our link at the top right and to our Sales Central. So right now, we have an offer where if the customer signs up to a 12-month contract with a minimum commitment of 50 terabytes, which is a really low commitment, the first 3 months are free. So in other words, they're getting 12-month contract for the price of 9, but they do not pay us any money until after month 3. This has been a very huge success, especially at the start of lockdown, where customers didn't know what was going to happen. This was a fantastic way for them to get on board with Pure and actually not have to worry about money for 3 months. And even then, they're still getting a huge discount. You'll note here, if the customer signs up for a 24-month contract, they will get the first 6 months for free. In terms of installations, we can deliver a remote installation service where either ourselves or authorized partners can actually do the installation remotely without actually having to go into the customer's data center. Because again, we're still aware that there are some access limitations to data centers. So in terms of hybrid cloud, what customers want is the flexibility to say, I've got data on premise, actually I'd like to move that into the cloud. How flexible is it to do that? How much more would it cost me to put my data in the cloud? With Pure as a Service, the answer is it doesn't cost you any more money. You have one subscription. The way that Pure as a Service is priced, and I'll come on to this shortly, it's priced per site. It's not priced per array. It's priced down to the amount of capacity that you have on a site. But that site can also include Cloud Block Store. So a customer may sign up to a 200 terabyte commitment, and he starts off on premise, and we put a physical array in their data center. And then that customer might say, well, actually, that 200 terabytes I've got on premise, I'd actually like to move 50 terabytes to the cloud. Now, what the customer can do is they can use Cloud Block Store in AWS today, Azure later this year. They could migrate 50 terabytes from their on-premise array to the cloud. So then they'd have 150 terabytes on premise, 50 terabytes in the cloud, but they still have one contract for 200 terabytes. Now, some other vendors may say, well, actually, on-premise 200 terabytes, if you want to do 50 terabytes in the cloud, that's a new contract. So suddenly the customer's paying for 250 terabytes. With Pure, you can move as much as you like from on-prem to the cloud. It's one contract. It's one subscription. And again, it's one storage environment. So the way that Cloud Block Store works is exactly the same as a physical flash array. So it's the same management, the same technology under the covers, and one subscription. So if we look at the CapEx versus OpEx, and there is no right or wrong answer, it does depend on what customers need. So if your capacity is very predictable, you know exactly how much you're going to grow by, and you have the money, then it might make sense to actually buy the array. But if you're going to have unpredictable workloads, if you have seasonal needs, then Pure as a Service, again, is going to probably be the right fit for that. From a budget perspective, you may have all the money available now, but would it be better off to spread that money? So rather than tying up 3 years worth of money on day one, spread that money over 3 years so you can actually use it to do other things. Or it could just be that you don't have a large CapEx budget and you have a smaller budget, but it's OpEx based. So again, you could do it that way. From a human resources perspective or management, from a physical perspective, you don't need to manage the array. You don't need to worry about when do I need to add more capacity? What's going to happen to the controllers? We will sort all of that out. You just provision the storage from the array. Let us worry about the hardware side of things. From a procurement perspective, if you're consuming this as a service, you don't need to do anything. If you need more capacity, you just keep paying your fixed rate cost. We will provide the additional capacity as part of the subscription service. You won't need to raise extra purchase orders or do an RFP. You just keep paying your same amount of money, and we will make sure that you actually get the capacity you need. There's no planned downtime with this. As I've said, everything at Pure is a totally non-disruptive upgrade. We even have an SLA commitment to this, so that if you don't hit your 99.999% uptime or whatever we agree to in the specific SLA, then you get substantial reductions on future payments. And technology refresh is included. We've always been doing this with the physical arrays. We do the same with Pure as a Service. So again, if we look at this, there is no right or wrong answer, but it depends what the customer needs. If you do want to remove CapEx from your balance sheet because you want to change the way your company reports, then Pure as a Service will be the way to go. Obviously, pay per use, etc. The key things really is that there is no forklift upgrade. I think that's one of the key things to take away here. If at the minute we've got the Flash Array X R3, it's our current array. If we go to an XR4, an XR6, maybe we call it Flash Array Z. I don't know. Whatever comes out next. If a customer is on Pure as a Service and we'd like to move them to the latest technology, that is a 100% non-disruptive upgrade. Now, if you look at the other vendors, I'm pretty sure if you went from one array to whatever their new array is, that will be a possible disruption and it will be a forklift upgrade. That is not true of Pure. So if we look at the other competitors out there, now this is one of our internal slides of Pure, and I've blanked out everything that I can. So hopefully I've not given it away who the competitors are, but I'm sure you can guess. The big things to take away from Pure, our minimum term of 12 months compared to some others where they're asking for a minimum term of 36 months. Our minimum commitment is 50 terabytes. It's very low. So for customers to get on board with Pure, 50 terabytes is low, 12 months is short, and you don't need to pay anything for the first 3 months. This is the easiest as a service model for customers to get on board with. Again, if you look at the others, there's lots of little caveats. There's lots of issues. There's lots of things you need to think about. What happens if new technology comes out? Is it going to be a forklift upgrade? Is it going to be a data migration? Will it disrupt my business, etc.? So let's look at the selling motion and how this actually works. So the reserve, the initial capacity that the customer commits to. So if a customer does commit to 50 terabytes over 12 months, we need that payment upfront from yourselves as the reseller. Now, the thing is, you could give us the purchase order for the full amount for the year, and then we could bill you for that entire amount upfront, or we can bill you quarterly. The way that this works, because of it's a subscription model, is we do need that reserve purchase order upfront for the entire amount. So if the customer commits to 100 terabytes for 24 months, we need a purchase order for that upfront, but we can bill you quarterly. How you as a reseller bill your customer is entirely up to you. You could bill them quarterly, yearly, annually, weekly. It's up to you. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. For the on-demand piece, where you go into your on-demand capacity, because we measure that throughout the various months, that gets billed quarterly in arrears. And you may also see this phrase CDE. This stands for compressed, deduped, or encrypted data. So if any data is going to be going on the array that is already compressed on the host, it's already deduped or it's encrypted, and we're going to get a low data reduction, then we may have to apply a different cost to that. So far during this presentation, this is the first time I've talked about dedupe or compression or data reduction, because again, the customer is paying for effective capacity. They're paying for the data that they actually write. The fact that the array might get 5-to-1 data reduction or 10-to-1 data reduction is entirely irrelevant to the customer. They're paying for the amount of capacity that they're writing, not for the amount of capacity that's actually being consumed in the array. So just key thing to think about, data reduction means nothing to the actual customer in this instance. It's about the data that they're actually writing. So a few key things. The systems need to connect to Pure One. They need to phone home so that we can monitor their usage. However, if you have a dark site, and we've got some big secure sites which are financial, some which are government, some which are defense, then they need to install something called Pure One Unplugged, which is basically a version of Pure One that can sit on premise. And that's designed for dark sites, because if we can't monitor how much data is being written to the arrays, then it's impossible for us and yourselves to bill that customer. We also require access to that customer sites, but obviously we talk to the customer, get them to open a ticket, do change control, but we do need to be able to get to the array to add capacity or perhaps remove it, but also maintain it, should a drive fail or something needs replacing. And this is 100% channel driven. It is only available through partners. If you as a partner would like to offer Pure as a service, there's an addendum to the contract you need to sign, but again, it's only a couple of pages, I believe. And then you bill your end user customer directly. So in terms of sizing, something I mentioned earlier, Pure as a service is priced per site, not per array. So in this example, site 1, reserve of 200 terabytes, that might be 2 separate arrays. Site 2 could be 1 array, site 3 might be 2 arrays. Again, it's per site, it's not per array. You can see from this example here, we've highlighted the 24-month cost of 9.7 cents. If you look above that to the on-demand rate, generally speaking, the on-demand rate is 50% more. So it's gone from 9.7 cents to 14.6. And obviously, the more that you sign up to, the cheaper your cost gets. So you can see the price brackets. And again, if you go to Sales Central, and I've got links at the end of this presentation, it will give you an idea of some of the kind of price bands. So the way that this works is we look at the amount of capacity in the reserve, we multiply it by the amount of terabytes times the year, and then how many sites they've got, and that gives them the size of their committed revenue. And then obviously your on-demand is just billed whenever they're using it, which is every quarter. So the question that I always get asked is, but how much does this cost? Is it cheaper or is it more expensive? You generally find that an as-a-service model will usually work out more expensive over time than if the customer was to buy the array on day one. But this is true of anything, right? Even if you lease a car, it's the same situation. People generally don't do as a service to save money over the long term. They do it to save money in the short term. Also, if you think about it, although I'm saying, well, actually, if you've got the cash, it's cheaper to buy an array. This assumes that at the end of, quarter 12 in this example, this assumes that you are consuming 100% of the array. Let's say, if you buy an array for 100,000 euros, but after 3 years, you've only used 70% of the capacity, then actually you've wasted 30,000 euros. You've wasted 30%. So you actually have bought something that you didn't need to buy. Therefore, you've wasted money. With Pure as a Service, it's the opposite. You're only paying for what you consume. Therefore, in the first, a lot of the early life of this storage array, you haven't spent as much money as you would, and you're only going to spend what you need. Now, another way to look at this is we can actually flip a customer from a CapEx model to an OpEx. So if you have got customers that have a Pure array, and then after 3 years, they said, well, actually, we haven't used as much as we thought. It's only 50, 60% full. With hindsight, it would have made more sense to have consumed this as a service rather than buy the whole array. We can flip that model. We can say, right, at the end of your support term, instead of renewing support for 3 years, let's keep the array, but we'll flip it to a Pure as a Service model. And we've done some multi-million-dollar deals where we've had customers that have got 80 or so arrays deployed, where we've looked at their usage and they said, actually, this would have made more sense if we'd done Pure as a Service, and we flipped them to an as a service model. So key takeaway really is, if you have the money to buy an array and you know that you are going to consume 100% of the capacity on that array in your time frame, then it might make sense to buy the array. However, if you don't think you're going to use all the capacity, or it's an unknown, then Pure as a Service makes a lot more sense. There is a very simple budgetary estimator on our Sales Central website. Again, the link is up there. It's not an official quote, but it gives you some idea of cost. You can build in things like your channel margin. Your local account manager can give you a rough idea of discount that you may be able to apply. You can put in different sites, and then you can see you're going to get the cost of your annual contract value and your total contract value. So Pure as a Service, it's not a lease. This is the key thing, right? So I know many other of our competitors, a lot of them have always done leasing. Now they've got new names for the things that they're offering that look like service models, but actually some of them turn out to be a financial lease wrapped up in some nice marketing words, right? So this is not a lease. Even though we are putting a physical asset in your data center, it is not a lease. The main thing is that there is no identifiable asset. The array that goes on site belongs to Pure. It is a Pure asset. It is never owned by the customer. In fact, if the customer said, actually, I want to flip from Pure as a Service to a CapEx model, I want to own the array, you couldn't keep that array that you got on site. What we would do, we would bring in a brand new array. We'd use Active Cluster to join the two arrays together. We would non-disruptively move the data from the Pure as a Service array to a real physical one, and then we take the Pure as a Service array away. So with as a service, it's very easy, right? The simplicity of Pure wins every time. There's no hidden finance charges. You get the first 3 months or 6 months free. We did, I think, in fact, one of the largest deals we've done in EMEA with a large financial customer. The reseller that was involved in that is one of our largest resellers. They looked at the as a service models from all of the competitors, and they said that Pure had the most rounded offering, the most comprehensive offering. So the fact that we can do very short term, very short commitment, it's 100% a subscription. So depending on your auditor, but it should be an actual OPEX treatment, plus our evergreen approach that you're never going to have to do a data migration. This just wins for customers every time. So final slide, I'll just point you to something called Sales Central. Now, if you're an authorized partner, which hopefully most of you are, you'll have access to this website. So when you go to the Sales Central link, which you can find from the partner portal, we have a huge amount of detail around Pure as a service. Everything from how you would quote it, the pricing, the discounting. We've got presentations, we've got white papers, we've got lots of FAQ documents. So if you have any questions, generally you should be able to find the answers there, but by all means, contact your local channel account manager to get any further information that you'd need. So I'll just have a look in the chat box to see if anything has appeared so far. At this stage, I don't believe we have any questions, but if there are any, feel free to post them in the chat or pop by our virtual booth. Yes, so the question was, do we support synchronous replication? So yes, absolutely, we do. So with synchronous replication, with two arrays that are kind of synchronizing the data, obviously it needs to be a high bandwidth, low latency link. It's less about the distance and it's more about the network round trip. So with Active Cluster, which is our synchronous failover solution, we support up to 11 milliseconds round trip. Now, depending on how many hops you've got in your network, that could be a few miles, it could be hundreds of miles. If you look at a latency calculator, 11 milliseconds, if you had one piece of cable, that could take you from London to South Africa. But again, 11 milliseconds round trip is quite high. We generally don't find customers going that high because that could impact their applications, but 11 milliseconds round trip is what we support for Active Cluster. Yeah, so in terms of our as a service business, so it is relatively new. So we did Pure as a service kind of in stealth mode, mainly for service providers. We'd been doing it, we had a different name for it, but it wasn't generally available. However, we launched it as a full kind of offering only within the last kind of 12 to 18 months. So it is relatively new. So as a percentage of our overall business, it's small, but in terms of its growth, it's huge. Our as a service business, if you look at our latest financial stats, and I'll get in trouble if I say them publicly, but have a look at our latest financial stats, our as a service growth is pretty much outstripping everything. I think the fact that we can offer this to customers, so we can quite easily say, if you'd like to buy the array, here's the cost. If you'd like to do as a service, here's the alternate cost. It's very simple to get a quote from us for this. And I think that's what customers like. It's the flexibility of having both of these options available. But yeah, it's very new for us, to be honest, but it is growing very, very rapidly. Yep. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening to this. Please pop by our virtual booth and we can answer any further questions you have there.